Hello, thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Clint Moon. I'm joined by my colleague Nikolai Michko. We're here to talk about enabling healthcare applications with HL7 FHIR. I am the Director of Solution Partner Sales, and Nikolai is the Manager of the Solution Partner Sales Engineering Group. And we have an agenda that covers about the next 30 minutes. I'm going to do a brief overview of InterSystems and more importantly, talk about our customers and give you a sense of who we are across the globe. Then we'll get into the meat of the webinar today to talk about why FHIR. In my opinion, FHIR is an incredibly important standard, and I think it's going to revolutionize healthcare in the world of interoperability, making the ability to communicate within an organization, enterprise, and across organizations in a very effective way to speak the same language. And then we'll wrap up the presentation today with a Q&A. So feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A box as we go along. So InterSystems is a global MedTech company. We have offices around the world. I think to give you a real idea of our market penetration, we have over 1 billion healthcare records in our data set. That's either enabled through our direct relationships with health organizations or through partnerships with solution partners, which I'll have a slide on in a few minutes. Here closer to home, over 2/3 of the patient records in the United States reside in our platform, again, through our direct relationship with organizations or through our partners. This is my favorite slide, at least in my portion. It gives you a sense of, where we are in healthcare. It's pretty much across the entire spectrum. On the provider side, 40 of the top 100 IDNs in the United States operate and are powered by InterSystems platform. From a health plan perspective, United Healthcare, National Health Plan, as well as a number of Blues and large regional health plans around the U.S. In life sciences with companies like IQVIA, Roche, amongst others. And to really kind of give you an idea of at the scale we operate, the two largest health information exchanges in the country, HealthFix and Manifest, are powered by InterSystems platform. HealthFix has a very broad and deep constituency and stakeholders contributing to the HIE from acute care, primary care, long-term care, health plans. So they're a very important hub in the greater New York area and data exchange. Manifest Medics, comparable size to HealthFix at 25 million patient records. They are a payer-backed health plan, or HIE, excuse me. And Anthem, Blue Shield of California, amongst a few others, are backing that private HIE. And then from a government perspective, internationally we sell our own EHR solution called TrackCare. In some cases, it runs an entire country's hospital system as an EHR. Chile is an example of that, portions of the UK. And then here closer to home again, we have the Veterans Administration runs on our platform, as well as the Social Security Administration. So again, you're looking at a breadth and a depth and a scale of where we're operating across the entire spectrum. And then, a major factor in our penetration in the marketplace is through our solution partners. Again, across the entire spectrum, you have Epic, #1 EHR in the world, and NetSmart Technologies, Behavioral Health EHR, Baxter Healthcare, med device company, Quest Diagnostics, and this is just a small sampling of our solution partners. So why would you be interested in FHIR capabilities? Well, I know you are because you're on this webinar here. But the philosophy behind FHIR is to really build, from a standards perspective, a common base set of resources that either by themselves or combined really satisfy the majority of use cases in terms of interoperability and data exchange across healthcare and across the globe. And it really allows organizations to speak a common language amongst them. I think the best example of that would be a payer and a provider, where they both have different systems, different data sets, but they certainly two different sides of the coin in healthcare. And FHIR will allow them to speak the same language. Think about the use case in and around prior authorization. it just makes the workflow and the data exchange a normalized data exchange where on both sides of the fence, they know what they're responsible for contributing as well as getting back. So this is my last slide before I will turn it over to Nikolai. There are a number of use cases that FHIR has applicability to. Nikolai will speak to the first three here, but this is just a small list. I mean, FHIR is a standard. It's an evolving standard. It's certainly taking hold in the marketplace already, and I expect it to accelerate over time. So I will turn it over to my colleague Nikolai, who can go into a little bit more detail on how InterSystems and InterSystems IRIS for Health can help you move into the world of FHIR.
Yep, and thank you, Clint, for the wonderful introduction. So for those who don't know me, I do see some familiar faces in the attendees, but I'm Nikolai Michko, and I run our solution partner engineering team here at InterSystems. And really what we are, we're a group of engineers that help our users become successful. And with that, we have a lot of experience with our partners who build applications. And the latest and greatest is FHIR. So Clint just laid out a few of the use cases of why you might want to use FHIR when building your healthcare or clinical application. But what I want to go into are three paradigms for these applications, which I've seen are very successful. So the three paradigms, what this slide shows are 1, 2, and 3. What I've seen are successful partner applications built on top of FHIR technology. So the first one that I'll go into is just building on top of a FHIR repository. Now, we'd love if you use InterSystems FHIR repository, but really using any FHIR repository on top of a clinical data set, it enables this really standard development model where you can pick and choose your own technology, you can pick and choose your own language, and be able to write an effective application that you put to market. The second one that I'll go into is maybe if you have an existing application and you've been now tasked to make it FHIR enabled. And so you can use option number 1, but option number 2 is to write the translations, or what we call a FHIR facade on top of that data. And I'll go into how we enable that and how it can be quite effective if you only need to use a limited subset of the FHIR capability. And then finally, I think is probably the hot button issue with any new data format is, what do I do with my existing formats? If I have existing HL7 FHIR or CCD documents, how do I get that into FHIR? And I'll go into that. And I think an overarching theme of this entire presentation is that it's all backed by InterSystems, and we've been in the market, like Clint said, for over 40 years now. We really have a high-touch model, and we really like to work closely with my engineering team, and our partner applications. So before I do that, I just want to introduce our platform. We have a Smart Data Fabric, which is a multi-cloud platform, which lets you develop applications for real-time use cases. And what this means is you can't afford for an application to go down. Typically, you want to choose InterSystems because we have the blocking and tackling as well as the pre-built support inside of our platform that enables you to do things like data management at scale, interoperability at scale, and analytics at scale. So InterSystems IRIS for Health is the name of this platform. And we have 3 key features, which is data management, which includes things probably most important to the audience today, like a FHIR repository that's built into the platform. We also have an interoperability toolkit, which is currently used, left, right, up, and down within the healthcare industry to actually connect clinical systems. And this is where we inherit a lot of our standard support. And then we have an analytical layer on top that enables you to really make sense of your data to ensure that you're really getting most of the value. You can squeeze the value out of the data you store, particularly in FHIR, from our platform. So to kind of get into it, if you don't know what FHIR is, and let me go back. If you don't know what FHIR is, it's really a complex healthcare format. And if you're familiar with HL7, that was transaction-based. If you're familiar with CDA or consolidated or clinical care documents, those are summary-based. And FHIR is sort of a mix of both. FHIR is a JSON-based format that really is a set of what are called resources. And resources are, you could think of these little dots that you see on the slide here as individual tidbits of data. So a resource might be related to a patient, Nikolai Michko. It might be related to a visit or an observation. Hey, my lab value was this. And they all kind of point to each other. So it's this sort of undirected mind map or graph that you have to make sense of. And really, this is where I think a lot of application builders start because it's in JSON. But then as you start getting deeper into it, you start looking for libraries or vendors to actually help with the format. And so with that, how do we make sense sort of as a core with this undirected graph, this complex format? Well, the first major application paradigm I see that's successful is building an application just on the FHIR repository. So a really key feature of this is that if you start with a modern healthcare format, you're automatically enabled for a modern healthcare format. So by building on a FHIR repository, InterSystems FHIR repository, for example, you enable yourself to automatically have all the FHIR version support like STU3, R4, and coming soon R5, as well as all the customizations we're seeing around the industry, such as R4 profiles. You can easily interoperate with all the modern EMRs. So the modern EMR vendors, you surely know the names of, the Epics, the Cerners, and all the Athenas of the world. They have FHIR first capabilities. They have FHIR first mindset. So by starting your application on a FHIR repository, it makes it very easy to interact with these individual clinical applications that you most commonly see in the industry. And I guess a key differentiator you might think about for InterSystems is that we have a pre-built FHIR repository in that you set it up, you click a button, and you have a FHIR endpoint, and you don't have to do a DIY. You don't have to do a Java or a Maven build. If you're an application developer, this means that you don't have to spend time kind of working, hey, how do I just get the pieces there? And from a business owner standpoint or an executive standpoint, you can be rest assured that, hey, you already have the support underneath. You don't have to spend developer hours just doing sort of the build phase of FHIR before you even work on your application. And so we include web development capabilities and all the standard APIs, including an embedded Python runtime to easily make sense of this data. And I think one of the key differentiators, this last point, and kind of overarch from the entire slide, is that we allow you to look at the FHIR data, not just in that graph format. We have what's called a FHIR SQL Builder, currently in our early access, which means you can actually flatten that mind map graph into rows, columns, and tables to do things like, hey, you want to run your application data directly off SQL, but it needs to be FHIR enabled. You can do that. If you want to make real-world registries, for example, in pharmaceutical use cases, you can throw all the data in FHIR and slice and dice the data however you want. And that's a huge benefit, I'm told. And just kind of overarching support, what this slide shows is really where we're thinking currently and going forward is that we support all the major formats. We're a format-first company. But really, if you want to be successful, you have to be able to both host a FHIR API and then model that data easily with the tools that let you edit or create FHIR resources out of the box. So things like just having a resource repository and the ability to interact with other repositories. So a FHIR server and client component, I'm told, are real keys to success when you're building on a FHIR repository for your entire application. And then just having the message model. So just being able to know that I can write my code in Java, .NET, C, Python with a pre-built messaging model for FHIR, that's huge because you don't have to worry about writing JSON parsers for every single event. You can just work with the pre-built messaging model. And you can see the other features we have on screen. What I would take away from this first use case is this is great if you're building a new application or you need to support the entire FHIR standard from your application standpoint. Moving on to this next one is a FHIR facade. So this is a great use case or paradigm if you have an existing application. So if you have an existing application with SQL tables, with data stored in one way or another, relational or unrelational, you may need to, for regulatory purposes, for a client need purpose, or really just a requirement to support FHIR endpoints and FHIR interactions within your application. So if I already have an application, I don't have to re-implement it on a FHIR repository. So a FHIR facade is a great model for you to implement in front of your application so that you can easily connect and interact with this new FHIR standard. So what the FHIR facade really is you take a FHIR request and map it to an incoming, profile or resource to your internal data model. And the example I show here on slide is, hey, patient number one, hey, that might be select star from patients where the ID equals number one. And so we provide the data modeling, data translation, and process orchestration out of the box to let you implement sort of the front end or the facade to your FHIR application, particularly with an existing application. And so moving on to the next slide, what this shows is the architecture. The way we think about this facade is on the left, you've got a FHIR repository or endpoint, and you have a bunch of requests that come in with services. And so the service layer is really your endpoint, and it's where we can consume and respond to FHIR endpoints. And then the process layer here in the middle is where we can do our business process orchestration and invoke a bunch of business rules to say, hey, when a patient request comes in, how do I handle that translation to a downstream system? And so business rules, data translation, and workflow optimization and workflow in the middle layer let us accomplish how we're going to convert that inbound format to our backend system. And then the operation is our backend system connection. And so the way you can think about it is just like you would read a book. Left to right, the data comes in. We say, hey, for this patient request or observation request, map it to some incoming or internal format or internal SQL table. And then let's accumulate the response, translate it the way we need to back to FHIR, and send it back off. And so a thing to take away is that we have all the components built in to let you just slot in where you want to put your business logic. So you don't have to worry about writing a bunch of custom code to handle a FHIR to internal application translation. So one thing to take away from this FHIR facade architecture or paradigm is that it makes FHIR enabling an existing application much easier than if you were to do it with custom code, and you can slot or enhance that FHIR support over time without having to make changes or deploy changes to your existing application. And so finally, the last paradigm I'm going to go into is, what if I just need to convert existing data formats? Maybe one of my customers sends me HL7 and CDA all day, and one of my customers says, hey, here's a bulk data dump of HL7 messages. How do we convert that to FHIR? And so one of the ways that we can handle is we provide out-of-the-box translations through what we call our Rosetta Stone data model called SDA. And what that does is it acts as this middle layer canonical model. So HL7 comes in, we convert it to SDA, and back out to FHIR. And so we've enabled these translations out of the box for near standard and near standard HL7, CDA, and X12 documents, so that you don't need to write these hard translations to get existing interfaces or existing data converted into FHIR. And it makes FHIR enabling an old data set very easy. So this also inherits a lot of the data modeling toolkit and data modeling features from our pipeline architecture. And so just to show you, our out-of-the-box model has pre-built transformations. So if HL7 V2, I think, is the most popular or utilized translation. And this happens on runtime. This happens as a transaction comes through, comes to SDA, and then to FHIR, meaning that you don't have to worry about sending this to a big batch job. We can process really and scale up many, many thousands of translations a second so that you can really pump in a lot of data or connect a lot of existing clinical feeds to FHIR. So with that, that's application paradigm number 3 that I see is quite popular when building a new FHIR application or FHIR enabling an existing application or data set today or over the past 12 months. So going forward, I really see that there are really 3 boxes of how we can help. Is that we've got the out-of-the-box interoperability on the left here, meaning that we have all the connectors that let you connect to existing data sources, and we have a FHIR repository built in. So it means that you can take that one model for application development and sort of run with it with FHIR, regardless of what the incoming data source is. We have the translation tools. So again, on the left is so that you can translate existing data both to FHIR or with a FHIR request. And we have this internal data model, our canonical messaging model, that lets you transform or enable FHIR on existing data sets or legacy or current data sets like HL7 or CDA. So with that, I'm going to get a drink of water, and I'll pass this back to Clint.
Excellent job, and I can tell you, Nikolai, some great questions have come in. I'll get to that in a second. As Nikolai alluded to earlier, we we have a high-touch model here at InterSystems. From a sales engineering perspective, our sales engineers work very closely with all of our customers, existing customers, as well as new partners that we're working with, and they really are a strategic advisor with respect to our technology, but also as an embedded technology in whatever solutions you're, in this case, maybe building a fire facade for. So they're highly qualified engineers, and we make them available directly to the customer. But also, as a global company, you would expect that we would have a world-class support organization, which we do. A recent Gartner Peer Insight study showed that, and I love this quote, it said, InterSystems support operates in rarefied air in terms of customer satisfaction. I believe we were number one compared to the entire industry, and I know that to be true simply because I've worked so closely with our partners over the years. So it's a 24/7 multilingual support organization, and again, a lot of the people that are answering the phones, taking inquiries over the internet or whatever, are engineers themselves. So very highly rated by Gartner Peer Insights. I imagine some of you would be interested to dip your toes in the sandbox here, and we do have our own sandbox. You can access it at this URL. But more importantly, we would invite you to contact either Nikolai or myself, and we can set you up with a more in-depth conversation on the topic of FHIR to see how we could help you with your needs. Anyway, I'd like to move on to the question and answer portion of this. And again, some great questions came in. It looks like I'll just take them from, oh boy, there are a lot of them, which is great. I'm going to start with, you mentioned Java. Nikolai, this is for you. You mentioned Java, Python, C++, I think, as supported languages. How about JavaScript /Node? Go ahead and Mark.
Yeah, this is a fantastic question, and I think it speaks to our sort of first choice or freedom of choice for developers. So if you want to write in the FHIR repository, you can use the InterSystems language called ObjectScript or our embedded Python. So that would be if you want to write code right on the server. And then we have what are called language gateways. So we have language gateways with native APIs that give you full access to the FHIR repository and all the same code that you would if you had code running right on the server. And those include Java. We have an external Python gateway as well if you want to run external code, C#. We also support Node.js, and I believe we do have an R gateway and as well a Golang gateway that's in development. So we do support tons of different languages. We certainly support freedom of choice here, but certainly worth a follow-up conversation on the actual semantics of what language you choose and where the code would run. And Glenn, I'll just take the next question from Brian. Is FHIR experience layer might make more sense than FHIR, and so good point. So the question reads: FHIR experience layer might make more sense than facade. From what it sounds like you were saying, it will be FHIR interactions with the external system, but internally the core app logic does whatever it wants. And yes, that is correct. So the idea with the FHIR facade is that you have the FHIR endpoint or interaction with the core system all working in FHIR. And then once you get it into the facade or interoperability layer, or what you call the experience layer, you can really do whatever you want with it to manage, map to your internal data. So certainly gives you a lot of freedom of how you actually implement those interactions. So hopefully that answers your question. The next one from Michael is, how real-time are the conversions of the facade? Typically, this is implemented in a real-time manner, and there are certainly lots of considerations to go into when you implement the facade. For example, you have to think about how is our downstream system going to react to queries? Is it going to be fast enough? If it's an external database, and you might want to think about some sort of caching layer, specifically when dealing with large data sets. So really it depends. The translation layer tends to be very quick. It's really the call to the downstream system, which I see. You just have to take some considerations in when you implement the FHIR facade. So next question from Mark at Amerisource Bergen. Can a deck be presented and shared with attendees? I believe that is the plan. So I believe that there will be an email follow-up to this that will include the deck. And if not, we can certainly do so.
No, I can confirm it is. We will be sending that out. Thank you.
So next question from Patty. Could you provide links for the e-learning? Yes, we can certainly do that. And there's no charge for the FHIR experience. So certainly you can go in and stand up a temporary environment and play around with our FHIR support with a few hands-on tutorials. So the goal of our FHIR experience is to ensure that you can see that it meets your needs before you actually contact us or make a decision on choosing the technology. So good question. Next question from Amit from Athena Health. Will IRIS FHIR support Smart on FHIR? So currently the IRIS for Health FHIR repository does support Smart on FHIR interactions. And so Smart on FHIR is a way for you to launch within an EMR a specific patient or provider context so that you only get data or FHIR data back based on specific criteria. So Amit, certainly feel free to reach out to us and we can show you a demonstration of IRIS FHIR using the Smart on FHIR launch and profile using the example EMR provided by Smart on FHIR. So very good question. Two more questions. Anil, has InterSystems worked with any skilled nursing facilities like point-click care or matrix care? I don't recall. Clint, do you know if we have?
No, you know what? I was thinking about that when I read it, and I don't know. I will research that and get back to you, Anil.
All right, so we will follow up. All right, next question. We have HealthShare presently. Setup of configuration of ODS, we need help. It's not straightforward for the FHIR clients. Is there any advice to get better understanding around this area? So, Sawyer, I certainly encourage you to reach out to whoever your sales engineers are at InterSystems, I believe under Jess Jowdy's team. But there is a way that we found that it's easy to connect Smart on FHIR applications, which would be through OAuth and the dynamic OAuth registration. So certainly we can reach out and provide more information there. So very good question. And some few more coming in. So we've got about a minute left. So Barun, good to see you. Been a long time since we worked together. If we have a FHIR-enabled EMR, what advantage would InterSystems FHIR provide? So very good question. And typically this is in relation to when you have a modern EMR like Epic or Cerner or Athena that have a specific FHIR URL as well. So the advantage InterSystems FHIR would provide is you can use a client model. So for example, to request data from the EMR using FHIR, you can use the FHIR client within our interoperability to be able to connect to that EMR and do maybe a little bit more with the data than you would have just on your own. So instead of just directly interacting with that EMR, you can then merge that with separate data sources, for example, or do different application level programming using that FHIR client. So very good question. And then finally, last question here. We've got about minus 30 seconds left. Brian from Medtronic, can we talk about application onboarding? So for the app market, Cerner code. So InterSystems really can act as an external source of data for these application markets. And what Brian is talking about, if you're familiar with Epic or Cerner, they have their own app markets where you can submit a Smart on FHIR application and work within the context of that EMR. Really the way that we help is think of us as being another source for that FHIR data. So the ability to run a Smart on FHIR app on top of your application. For example, it could be the Medtronic application. You could run a Smart on FHIR app on top of that, the InterSystems IRIS for Health platform as well. So a bunch of great questions. We can certainly take a screenshot of any more that come through and respond via email. But just want to thank everyone for joining today and listening to what we have. And if you're interested, by all means, we'll send the deck after and a follow-up email. And please take a look. We have a pre-recorded video demo, or reach out to us directly. We're always happy to talk and always happy to help.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nikolai. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for attending today.
Thanks, everyone.